Hello everybody, today I want to teach you how to mix your kick and bass. Because right now I've finished all of the draft mixes for the album and I'm starting to dive into the details. And one of the things that I'm of course looking at is the tonality and just the overall sound of my kick and bass. So here's an example of what we have. And one of the first things that I want to point out is that I have already done a little bit of EQing, as you can see, both on the bass line as well as on the kick drum. This is when I initially added all of the elements to the track. So this was just my first idea of what I thought the kick and bass needed in the very first moments that I heard it. But now, of course, I'm in the process of just continuously listening and continuously trying to make it better. And one of the first things that I've noticed is, especially in comparison with the rest of the album, this kick and bass is very hollow. So just listening to it solo, you can hear what I mean. It has a nice click, it has a nice low end, but it really doesn't have anything exciting in the middle. So the way that I want to fix that is using my favorite EQ for when I'm doing bass lines, and that is transgressor. And I'm mainly going to elongate the transient by turning up the release here and then just kind of turning up that area a little bit. Another thing that I often find myself doing to kind of smooth out my bassline is turning down the high frequencies over here in the sustain. As you can see, I had to compensate a little bit for the gain with that. But I do think that we're getting a nice focused, more punchy tonality out of the bassline now. I'm going to EQ the bassline once more to just enhance the transients a little bit more. So the high frequencies here. And this is, as you can see, all being done soloed. So what we need to do now is we need to hear, okay, does it actually sound good with the track? Because we've made some decisions on how the kick and bass sounded in comparison to the other tracks. So now I want to hear, okay, does it still work within itself, within its own track? Kick is sounding nice, it's maybe a little bit on the loud side now. Right now I feel like our kick drum is not punchy enough. So I was reading Computer Magazine Advanced Mixdown Secrets in preparation for this video, as one does. And actually one of the tips that was included in there is that you should ask me about my mixing services. No, hang on, I'll just put something on the screen actually. Well, if you find that interesting, let me know and you can just message me, DM me. But for anybody that is not interested, good news for you because we're now continuing with the video. So now we're getting the tonality down with the track as well. As you can see, in terms of the part that I'm using to actually listen to it, I'm not using the busiest part to listen to it. I'm also not using the quietest part to listen to it in terms of other elements playing. The reason why I don't use the very busy part is because then you don't really get to hear all of the like very small details that you need to hear. And the reason why I don't use the most empty part is because I do want to have a little bit of context to actually compare with. If I use, for example, this part as a very full part, I'm not going to be really able to focus on all of the details. And if I use a part like this, I might not actually have enough context to make decisions on what the kick and bass needs in comparison with the rest of the track. So as I said, I try to find an area which is not entirely full and not entirely empty, just something that has a little bit going on at least. So something like that gives us enough context to actually judge what is going on with our kick and bass. And another thing that allows us to judge our kick and bass is going to be some analyzers. Because when it comes to kick and bass, I am not entirely trusting of what I hear. So what I do tend to do is I just have a quick look at a size scope. Let's also listen to the bass line on its own, just to make sure there is a little bit of bleeding happening over here, which you can see just going down a little bit. Now, practically speaking, that is not really going to mess up your kick and bass, but I do always like to just work in a clean way. So what you'll always find me do towards the end of my chain in the bass line at least, is just do a little bit of this so that it cuts out that little area. Now, listening to the kick drum, we can already see that this is going to be short enough. It doesn't extend into here and cause any problems for our bass notes that are going to be playing here. So from a just purely technical standpoint, our kick and bass is going to be working now. And it's mainly going to be about the tonality and all of the balances between the kick and bass to actually see if it's going to work within the context of a mix. But in terms of everything playing in its own area and everything having its own space within time, within the beat actually. So you have your kick drum playing over here, you have the second bass note playing over here, and then you have the final third bass note playing over here. And of course, the first bass note is layered on top of this part of the kick drum. If all of that is done, if all of that is fixed, you're going to be pretty much in the right spot in terms of just the punchiness that you can get out of a bass line. Because when all of the notes go to silent over here and then the transient starts to play, it is going to give the maximum amount of dynamic punch that the bass line is going to be able to give. And of course, we want that to happen on each of the different transients. So that is why we make sure that our kick and bass is staying nicely in a pocket, which looks something like this. So you can see it goes to silence and then the bass note plays. It goes to silence basically over here. It is a little bit off here, but that doesn't really matter. As long as it gets very, very close to silence, it's going to be okay. And then you can see the transient starts to play. And here again, it goes to silence before the kick drum plays. So that is a really important aspect of mixing the kick and bass. Now I'm leaving a lot of stuff out, mainly all of the stuff that I've covered in the Ultimate Guide to Kick and Bass. And that is mainly focused around the production, because I do believe that a lot of the processing of your kick and bass, a lot of the different decisions that you're making in terms of phase, in terms of phase alignment and that kind of stuff, but also just in the phase processing of your bass line. All of that stuff belongs in the production because it's so crucial to the tonality of the track that you want to establish that already in the production. And that is also one of the reasons why I tend to not do a lot of processing on the kick and bass, both on the individual channels as well as on the group together. In fact, as you can see, there is no kick and bass group. I have my kick over here with all of its different variations. So that's going to be the main kick for the beat, and then everything for rolls and build-ups and reverse kicks and all of that stuff have their own tracks. And then the bass line is all the way down over here in its own little group where we have it together with the bass line in the break. The reason why I'm doing that is because personally I like to treat the kick and bass as two separate elements, both in the production but also in the mix, because I believe that the kick and bass do two different things. They have two different functions within the track. And therefore, in my eyes, they're also two different elements. And I don't really see the need to, what a lot of people tend to do, kind of glue them together or process them together. I establish all of my gluing between those two elements actually in the master, because they're actually going to get summed together in the down mix. As you can imagine, this is the mix bus where they're both summing into, both this drums group, which contains my kicks, as well as this bases group, which we saw before contains my main bass, as well as the bass for the breakdown. They're actually going to get summed together into my mix bus, which is then going to be rendered out, and that is going to go into my master chain. Now, of course, you don't have to work like that. Of course, you can group your kick and bass into a group together, and if you get good results doing that, then continue doing that. And that is true a little bit for the whole workflow that you're seeing here. As you can see right now within the mix, I'm not doing too much to the actual sounds. I'm not changing it up too much. So I hope this wasn't bigger than you expected. At this point in the creation of the track, I'm pretty much like concluded on what the kick and bass should sound like. As you can imagine, when it comes to the time it takes, the production stage is the longest, and then we're going to have the mixing stage, and then finally the mastering stage is going to take a day for the whole album. So the productions have taken like 1.5 years in total, and then the mixing and mix prep and mixing is going to take 3-4 months now, and then another day for mastering, and then I need to do visuals and all the other things that you need to do with a release. But you can imagine that most of my time spent with the tracks actually happens in the production stage. And that means that also most of the decisions that I'm making happens in the production stage. And that kind of results in the idea that for each individual element, I don't tend to do a lot of processing in the mix. It's mainly about finding the balance between the elements. And that means that you're at most going to see a couple of different EQs here, maybe a little bit of dynamics. Of course, I'm still building on this project. There might be maybe 10, 20 more plugins added to fix all of the problems that I'm still hearing. I haven't gotten to this particular track yet, but I've listened to the first 2 now. And you can see that in those tracks, I've already quite a few problems listed out. And once I solve that, all I need to do is I need to analyze once more all of the tracks together, see if they still work as a whole, as a collective, as an album. And if that is not the case, then I might still add even more plugins. But to be honest, you're probably going to be surprised how little plugins I'm actually using at this stage, how little effects I use on everything. Most of the tracks are going to end up being completely empty, and I just have to do the volume balance. Because at the end of the day, one thing that you need to understand about the mixing process is that it is this smaller finalizing, like final check stage that isn't going to suddenly turn your track into a whole new idea. It is just going to upgrade it a little bit. It's just going to polish it a little bit. Don't have this high expectation that you can go in there with a shitty production and the music just sounding completely off, and that you can just, by throwing a couple of final extra plugins on there, just magically turn that around. You have to produce already the kind of quality music that, if mixed well, is going to get you that great kind of track. So that's going to be everything for today. Little final thought there on what the mixing stage is actually supposed to be about. I hope that you enjoyed this kind of content. I hope that you're enjoying March Mixing Madness. Of course, if you are, let me know by leaving a like. And if you're new here, make sure that you're subscribed. Another way to support the channel is by doing so financially, which you can do over on my Patreon page, or by joining the membership, which you can find right next to the subscription box. So thank you if you do that. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.